I understand why they did that.
Yeah.
They did that to box us in and put us as a group. You know what I mean? Nobody ever called themselves no fucking Grundys, bro.
When we posted parts 1 and 2 of this story, something happened that we weren't fully prepared for. We laid out the facts. The 2 shootings, the rifle, the Grundy crew connection, the federal cases that collapsed, and the acquittals that followed. We told you about the debt, the $750,000 figure circulating in the community, and we told you we couldn't confirm it. We asked you what you thought happened to Eric Butler. And then the comments came. Not guesses. Not theories pulled from thin air. Specifics. Consistent details from multiple people, unprompted, pointing in the same direction. People who are close to Indianapolis, close to the East Side, close to a world that law enforcement has gone publicly silent on. And what they told us, combined with new developments in the official investigation that dropped after our last episode, means we have to come back. This is part 3. And tonight, we go deeper than we've gone yet. This is Mystora Crimes, where secrets, justice, and humanity collide. If you're just finding us, go back and watch parts 1 and 2 first. Everything tonight builds on what we already established. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's get into it. Let's start with what's new on the official side, because while the streets were talking in our comments section, the federal government was also making a move. After parts 1 and 2 went up, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, formally entered the Lil E investigation. On July 2nd, 2026, they announced a $5,000 reward for information leading to the identification and arrest of whoever is responsible for the death of Eric Butler. The ATF confirmed it is now assisting IMPD with all available federal resources. Now, we need to pause on that for a second, because the ATF does not insert itself into local homicides as a courtesy. Their mandate centers on illegal firearms, federal firearms trafficking, and organized crime with a weapons dimension. When they enter a case involving a man with Eric Butler's specific history, a high-ranking member of one of the most federally prosecuted drug organizations Indianapolis has ever seen, the implied message is clear. This investigation has dimensions that go beyond a single shooting on a single night. The federal government is looking at something that connects to a bigger picture, and all they've said publicly is $5,000 and a tip line. No suspect named, no motive confirmed, no arrest. Detective Christina Friel at the IMPD Homicide Office leads the local investigation. The ATF stand behind her with federal resources. And as of today, both the June 19th murder and the April 23rd non-fatal shooting remain open, unsolved, and officially unlinked. That silence is loud, and the community filled it. Here is the first thing the comments brought us that changes how we see this case, and it has to do with geography. In parts 1 and 2, we told you Eric Butler was shot twice in less than 2 months. What we hadn't broken down yet was exactly how close together those 2 incidents were. When we went back to the official records after our last episode, the details stopped us cold. The April 23rd shooting, the one he survived, happened in the 8,000 block of East Washington Street, a parking lot outside a business. He was listed as stable. The June 19th murder happened on the 200 block of South Franklin Road. The distance between those 2 locations is 0.3 miles, 0.3 of a mile, on the same stretch of the east side of Indianapolis. The same man, 57 days. And the second time, whoever came brought a rifle, because IMPD's own report lists a rifle as a murder weapon, and a car at the scene was riddled with bullet holes. You do not accidentally find the same person in the same quarter-mile radius twice in 2 months. You do not bring a rifle by accident. This was someone who knew exactly where Eric Butler was, who watched, who waited, who tried once, failed, and came back more prepared. That geography is not a coincidence. It is a hunting pattern, and it tells us something critical about who we are looking for. Not someone distant, not someone from outside the city making a visit, someone local, someone embedded in that specific corridor of the East Side, someone for whom South Franklin Road and East Washington Street are familiar ground. Now, let's bring in what the community told us, because this is where Part 3 gets its teeth. We already covered the $750,000 debt figure in our previous episodes. The community-level claim that Butler had a significant financial obligation connected to the drug supply networks that outlived the Grundy organization. We framed it carefully then, and we maintain that framing now. Unconfirmed, not in any court filing, not attributed to any named source in verified reporting, but consistent across multiple community voices. What the comments on parts 1 and 2 brought us that we had not heard before was 2 new threads. And together with the debt, they built a picture of a man who was not facing 1 threat. He was facing 3. The first new thread, a robbery, multiple commenters, independently and with a level of specificity that we couldn't dismiss, describe an incident in which Lil E allegedly robbed someone, not a street-level dispute, a robbery of goods. And the value of what was allegedly taken sits between $200,000 and $250,000. Think about what that means in the context of the world Eric Butler was navigating. $250,000 in goods, allegedly taken by force from someone with the resources, the connections, and the willingness to respond. And according to what the community is saying, the response was not a counter-robbery. It was not a legal complaint. The response was a decision that the only acceptable answer was to kill. That framing, that the April shooting was the warning and the June murder was a verdict, is entirely consistent with how retaliatory violence operates inside networks like this. You send a message first. If the message doesn't land the way you intended, you close the account permanently. And the second time, you bring something that guarantees you don't have to come back a third time. A rifle. The second new thread from the comments. Territory. Several people told us that in the period before his death, Lil E was being perceived by certain people in certain circles on the east side as competition, not just someone who owed money or had taken something. A rival, a threat to someone's position, someone whose presence, whose credibility, whose connections, whose movement on the east side was being read as a challenge to turf that someone else considered theirs. This is a dynamic that anyone who has followed the aftermath of major criminal organization collapses will recognize immediately. When the Grundy crew was dismantled, the territory it held didn't go neutral. It got contested. The people who moved into that vacuum were not going to hold it peacefully. And anyone who represented a claim on that same ground, whether through old relationships, through active street presence, through the kind of reputation that Lil E had built over a decade, became a problem that needed to be addressed. If the community is right about this, then what we are looking at is not just a debt situation or a robbery retaliation. It is a convergence. A man who owed serious money, a man who allegedly took something of serious value, and a man whose very existence on those streets was being interpreted as a territorial threat. 3 separate reasons to want him gone. 3 separate grievances converging on the same target, and all 3 of them landing in the same 0.3-mile radius of the east side of Indianapolis over 57 days, with a rifle the second time. Now here is what I want you to sit with, because this is where the humanity of the story becomes almost unbearable to look at directly. Eric Butler knew. He had to know. You do not survive a shooting and go back to the same streets in the same neighborhood without understanding, on some level, what you are walking back into. His studio engineer Drew said after his death that he bounced back every single time, bigger and better, the whole city watching, most people trying to tear him down. And people close to him confirmed he had record deals under consideration in those final weeks. New music in the works. He believed his biggest opportunities were still ahead. So here's the picture the full story paints. A man who was simultaneously the closest he had ever been to a legitimate breakthrough, and the deepest he had ever been inside a situation that was closing in on him from multiple directions. A debt of $750,000. An alleged robbery that cost someone $250,000 in goods and cost Butler his life. A territorial perception that made his presence on streets he had known his whole life feel like a provocation. And through all of it, he kept recording, kept performing, kept moving towards something. That is not recklessness. That is not stupidity. That is what it looks like when a person is trying to hold 2 worlds together at the same time and running out of time to choose between them. The ATF has a tip line open right now. 1-888-ATF-TIPS. That's 1-888-283-8477. You can email ATF tips at atf.gov. Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana takes anonymous tips at 317-262-8477. The cases, both the murder and the April shooting, are open. The families are waiting. And the federal government, for all its resources, is relying on the community to break this open. Which brings us back to you. Parts 1 and 2 of this story unlock something. The comments told us about the robbery, about the territory, about what the streets know that the investigation hasn't confirmed. So let's keep going. If you know something about the debt, about what was allegedly taken and from whom, about who controls that corridor of the east side right now, about what happened in those 57 days between April 23rd and June 19th, the comments are open. We are not here to convict anyone. We are here because Eric Butler's family deserves answers. Because 2 open homicide cases on the east side of Indianapolis, Butler and Cornell Davis, Playboy the Great, killed just 45 days before him, also unsolved, represents silence that should be unbearable to anyone who believes justice means something. What do you think? 3 motives, debt, robbery, territory, all converging on the same man. Does that change how you see what happened? And what does it say about the world that someone has to navigate when the system dismantles the organization around them, but leaves the debts and the enemies behind? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Mystora Crimes. We will keep following this until it breaks open, because secrets don't stay buried. Not here.